The train wreck has arrived. We hoped it never would, but alas and alack, it has. And now that it's here, it is my duty to subject my eyes and ears to its horror. But what if it's good? I mean, all the first reactions were surprisingly positive. The Dis Insider described it as pure Disney magic, in all caps, no cap. That's what the kids are saying these days, right? Screen Rant said it's quite charming. We Love Physical Media said, not a fan of Zegler or Godot, but man, this ended up being so good. I mean, that so had 3 O's on it. What if I can't deny that it's a really good movie? How am I going to admit I was wrong for crapping all over it for so long? Oh no, what if I can't even say it. What if I have to apologize to Rachel Zegler? Well, the good news is I don't have to worry about any of those questions because it sucked. 3 of the 15 people in my theater walked out about 25 minutes in. I've never seen 20% of viewers walk out of a theater in my life, like they already paid. If I were to go through every single scene, this video would be longer than my Madam Web breakdown, and I've got March Madness to watch. So we're going to go over the 7 worst parts of this movie, the 7 crimes against storytelling. Let's start at the end, shall we? Because it's the funniest thing Disney has done in years. This movie ends with the evil queen, I guess, dying? She dissolves into black chunks and gets sucked into the magic mirror. And this happens because she attacks the mirror for saying that Snow White is fairer than her. So the dwarves and lightning don't defeat the evil queen like in the original movie. Snow White doesn't defeat the evil queen because she's basically useless in this film. And the bandits don't defeat the evil queen. No, the evil queen defeats herself by smashing a mirror. Sure. But here's exactly what the mirror says. Famed is your beauty, but it is only the skin. Snow White's runs deeper, for it comes from within. So yeah, they're basically saying Snow White is fairer than the evil queen, like she's fairer, more equitable. Because we all know that no one could ever delude themselves into actually thinking Rachel Zegler is more beautiful than Miss Israel. She's nicer, that's where her beauty is. Which, how awful are the people in this kingdom? Snow White was the only woman the mirror could find in all those years who had more internal beauty than the evil queen. She's literally called the evil queen. And really, this chick, she's the fairest of them all on the inside? The same one that wishes for half the people she shares a country with to never know peace? The one that demands everyone respect her simply because she's got fallopian tubes as she's flipping everyone off? I know that she's not actually Snow White and that this is a fictional movie, but like, come on. It's like watching Blake Lively play a character who gets described as a patient, level-headed co-star who supports the director's vision. Or a porn star get cast in a movie to play a virgin. How am I not supposed to laugh? I guess my suspension of disbelief capabilities just aren't high enough. It's important to know why people are so disappointed in this film, beyond just it being awful, and beyond even bastardizing a classic story like Mulan or any other live-action remake. Snow White was the first feature-length animated film. Not just Disney's first, the first ever. It's a classic and a huge landmark in cinema history. Is it a great movie from an objective writing standpoint? Not really. So there's a lot they could change to make it better this time around. They could develop an actual relationship between Snow White and the prince and show us that they're in love. The prince is actually barely in the original film at all, despite what Rachel Zegler said.
There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah. Weird.
Now, they did make some changes, but not to make the story better. Rather to make it more... How did Rachel Zegler put it?
I know that you've told me before that your version of Snow White is different, and it's more of a 2022 version of Snow White.
Some of the changes are small, like Dopey. Heaven forbid there be a stupid character just in there for comic relief, especially a dwarf. No, Dopey's not stupid anymore, as his name would suggest. He's just scared to speak. So Snow White teaches him to whistle, and his little character arc comes to an end when he actually speaks. It's not the worst thing, fine, you gave him a character arc, but it seems to reflect an underlying value of we can never punch down on a fictional character. But again, that's not the end of the world. So what does a 2022 version of Snow White look like?
It's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that
She's
is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love.
Ah, yes. Why don't we take the love out of the love story? I'm sure we'll still be able to recapture the magic. Also, she actually does still get saved by the prince, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Why is this a 1937 thing, dreaming of true love? Have women in Western societies actually moved beyond love? I know women, and at least the women I'm friends with who seem to be pretty well adjusted and happy most certainly haven't. Like, how do you speak about true love so derogatorily? Oh, the horror! Why would any self-respecting woman dream of lifelong companionship, happiness, and family? But back to Rachel's other comment that Snow White's not going to be saved by a man. God, yeah! Yeah, she will. I will say, this is the best part of the movie. Knowing that they did reshoots that turned out terribly, that were solely to reverse what Zegler had loved about it because everyone hated her and what she said so much. But yeah, she eats a poison apple of sleeping death and falls asleep, / dies. And then her love interest, who is not a prince but rather a bandit leader, don't worry, we'll get to him too, gives her love's first kiss which wakes her up. I'll admit, I was surprised they actually let him kiss her. I figured he would just kiss her forehead or something, but technically, he does kiss her on the lips. And I say technically like that because it's the biggest wuss kiss I've ever seen. He barely grazes her lips. I'm not big on romance in movies for romance's sake. I can't stand rom-coms. But as a man, just sack up and kiss her, you pansy. Now, of course, many people object to the classic kiss to wake Snow White up because she didn't give consent. Many people, who I can only assume others intentionally structure their plans around avoiding at social gatherings. This is triply stupid. First, the kiss saves her life. This is like objecting to a drowning victim receiving rescue breaths, the mouth-to-mouth you get before CPR. Second, they are in love, or so the film tells us. I will get to that later. Again, I can only assume if you have a problem with this that you've never been in a relationship where you didn't try to guess the other person's phone passcode every time they left the room. I can assure you my fiancé would have no problem with me kissing her while she was asleep. And no, I've never specifically asked her about that. I'm just going off the fact that she's not an insufferable lunatic. Third, and finally, something you maybe haven't thought of before, Snow White takes place sometime around 15th century Germany. And in medieval Europe, kissing the lips of the dead was actually customary at funerals to bid farewell to a departed soul. So all the people simultaneously saying we need to respect other cultures and the prince is a stalker or whatever can all go pound sand. But there's no way this kiss should have even revived Snow White, because these two are not in love. Let's talk about that in the third crime, Snow White herself. We start at the beginning for Snow White. Why is she called Snow White? Clearly not for the classic reason, her skin being white as snow. No, because we can't have even the slightest minute inkling of a possibility of accidentally maybe being subconsciously perceived as showing a positive or even neutral feeling towards being white, Snow White got her name because she was born during a snowstorm. I'm sure a similar lore modification wouldn't have been necessary had her name been Ebony Black, but you already know that, so we won't belabor the point. Her parents preside over their happy kingdom where it's always sunny, and someday Snow White will grow up to take their place. But tragedy befalls the family when her mom dies. That's when her dad, the king, meets the stupid queen. But she will get her own crime, don't you worry. Snow White's father mysteriously disappears, and the kingdom descends into a bleak hopelessness under the tyrannical rule of the queen, while Snow White is subjected to basically being a Cinderella-type slave, cleaning the floors. She has this desire to lead her people into better days, but she also comes right out and says she doesn't know what's going on outside the castle walls. When she is made aware of how bad things have gotten in the kingdom, it's coming from a man who she catches stealing food from the castle. So a thief. And on his word, she comes to the conclusion that her people are suffering. And her solution? I really can't make this up. Her solution she proposes to the queen is to make the people pie. Like apple pie.
There are many type of pies. There is apple pie.
Now look, in an animated children's movie, this might play. But this is no longer a charming children's tale that can end with the carving of the roast beast. And I didn't raise that bar. Disney and Rachel Zegler did.
There's such an emphasis on what it really means to be the fairest of them all. And for Snow White, it's coming to terms with finding herself and finding her inner voice and finding a sense of agency so that she can be a just ruler and a wonderful queen.
So I guess that's what a just ruler is. Someone who makes their royal subjects pie. Or maybe lets them eat cake. And why does Snow White think she should lead her people? Because it's her birthright. That's it. She hasn't learned how to be a good leader by watching others. She doesn't even know what's going on in the kingdom. It's just driven by arrogant entitlement, an attitude which, surprise, surprise, Rachel Zegler can nail.
I'm a narcissist.
Her formative years have been spent being a janitor cut off from watching the queen lead, and she's not shown to step up into any leadership role throughout the movie. People just stick their necks out for her because she's Snow White. Again, that's fine. It's basically what happens in the original movie, but this one raised the stakes and set out to be more, to deliver a more serious message beyond just the jealousy age has towards young beauty. And it failed. Miserably. Speaking of people sticking out their necks for Snow White, that brings me along to the bandits and Jonathan. Remember the 7 diverse retards they were originally going to try to replace the dwarves with? And the one actual dwarf?
And we've got sausage and midgets, all waiting in the car just for you.
Well, they're still in the movie. Now they're bandits who oppose the evil queen in whatever ways they can, in loyalty to the fallen king, although they think he's still alive. We'll get there. They're led by Jonathan, like Robin Hood and his band of merry men, except that they're not fun or cool. They're incredibly lame. They're former actors who have been put out of work because of the evil queen. I don't know if this is some sort of reference to the SAG-AFTRA strike, and honestly, I don't care. What I do care about is the man who becomes Snow White's true love, Jonathan. This is one of the worst love stories put on screen in living memory. The original Snow White barely had any development of the love connection between Snow White and the prince. That's because the movie was about Snow White and the 7 dwarfs, hence the title. And the fact that she loved the prince is just part of the world building, so it gets a bit of a pass. But here, they share a lot of screen time together, and there's no real indication they have a connection or really like each other, nor should they. Immediately, he should hate her. She has done nothing to fight back against the queen while she's been enslaved. And you should imagine I'm using scare quotes around enslaved because she still gets to eat dinner with the queen at the royal table, which is a lot more than any of her subjects get, including these bandits. She annoys him. They even sing an equally annoying song about it called Princess Problems. She doesn't actually show him gratitude after he basically sacrifices his life for her taking an arrow to the chest. This is not an opposites attract or an enemies to lovers thing. They don't have chemistry. She doesn't restore some sense of goodness and hope and appreciation for beauty and the smaller things in life in him like a woman can do to a man. Because the worst thing that can be portrayed in modern Hollywood is a woman fulfilling the role of a fully realized feminine female, a true power that progressivism hates to recognize. So when Jonathan restores Snow White with his nervous graze of a kiss, it's a payoff undeserving of the setup. And that's what plagues this movie, as with most bad movies. We get payoffs that have no setup that merits them. Or in the case of the evil queen, payoffs that just make the character involved look like a mentally retarded koala that sniffed too much glue in elementary school. So when we get to the end of the movie and Snow White returns to confront the queen, after the queen makes more stupid decisions, we know there's been nothing set up for how she's going to defeat her. She has demonstrated no keen strategic prowess to indicate she might have a plan to overthrow her. She has no abilities to best her in combat, especially with the magic the queen has. And anything like some stupid act of kindness towards the queen that actually succeeds would be antithetical to her villainous nature. Well, what do? Snow White shows kindness to the queen's guards in the form of remembering their names. That's all it takes. And just like that, they turn on the queen. It's so stupid. The only payoff that actually has a setup is that they make pies at the end of the movie. And that setup was so ridiculous it doesn't get any credit. Now, before I move on from Snow White, I might as well comment on Rachel Zegler's performance. She's actually a good singer. I would hope so, since her background is in musical theater and her breakout performance was in Spielberg's West Side Story. It pains me to pay her any compliments, but I'm nothing if not honest. As far as her acting performance, I really can't say with certainty if it's her fault as an actress or the writer's fault for creating a terrible script. Probably a mix of both. She doesn't come off likable throughout the movie. Again, she's not receiving much help from the writers, and I think it's an unfortunate combination. The story should be constructed so as to make Snow White very likable. A beautiful, demure, kind, almost motherly presence in the rough forest that brings beauty to a shack where 7 miners lay their heads. Remember in the original movie, when she goes into the dwarf's home and sees the little beds? She remarks to her animal friends, who have a much smaller presence in this film, not helping her cause, that, oh no, perhaps she's stumbled into a house of children who don't have any parents. And even with 1937 animation, it's conveyed that she's heartbroken for these children. Well, as we've discussed, this film doesn't have any of that. It unfortunately succeeds in writing Snow White as an entitled, standoffish brat, more snippy with the dwarfs, minus Dopey, and bandits than with the evil queen. And that's exactly how Rachel Zegler has portrayed herself ever since she was placed in the spotlight for this movie. That's exactly who Rachel Zegler is. So there's no chance of her natural charisma shining through the bad writing to give it a little lift. No, rather her off-putting personality usually feeds into the terrible writing to create one horrible symphony. But she's not the worst actress in this film. Not by a long shot. Yo, wake up, Grandpa. New Gal Gadot cringe delivery just dropped, and it's almost as bad as...
Kalel, no!
Pies are luxuries. They don't need luxuries. It confuses them.
Can we stop with Gal Gadot now? She's very beautiful, but she can't act to save her life. There are plenty of competent actresses who are also very beautiful, so let's move on from her. But the evil queen, or I should call her the stupid queen, the way she's written is even worse than the way she's played. She's just an idiot. And I feel like maybe I should be more lenient because this technically is a children's movie, but no, plenty of children's movies have competent, well-written villains, and children deserve good movie characters too. Let's highlight 3 of the stupidest things she does in this movie. When she sends her huntsman to kill Snow White, she gives him a small chest in which he is supposed to cut out and place her heart, just like in the original.
I got a jar of dirt, I got a jar of dirt, and guess what's inside it?
Now, in the original, after the huntsman lets Snow White escape, he puts a pig's heart in the chest and gives it to the evil queen. She sees the heart, understandably assumes it's Snow White's. I don't have a whole lot of experience with pig hearts, do you? And she can breathe a sigh of relief as her reign as fairest of them all remains unchallenged. In the live-action remake, the huntsman puts an apple in the chest. Obviously, nobody could ever confuse an apple for a heart. Although if anybody could, Gal Gadot's stupid queen could. So how does she not immediately realize that the huntsman betrayed her? Well, because she never opens the chest to verify that the job has been done, and only does so after the mirror realizes that Snow White is alive and informs the queen as such. Like, why did you even ask the huntsman to bring you back her heart, if not so you could verify that Snow White was dead? And we're just getting started. When the stupid queen is brewing the potion to create the poison apple, she sees that the spell can be reversed by love's first kiss, just like in the original. And when she gets Snow White to eat the apple, she bails right after, just like in the original. In neither version does she attempt to secure Snow White's body to eliminate the chance of love's first kiss resurrecting her. But there are differences that make this decision much worse this time around. In the original movie, she exits the dwarf's house and immediately is chased away by the dwarfs, which eventually leads to her falling to her death. She also only catches a glimpse of the prince interacting with Snow White, and it's as she watches from a window as he sings a song to her while she's basically hiding inside the castle. The point is, she doesn't know that Snow White has a true love who could reverse this spell. The most you could say is that she knows the prince loves Snow White, not necessarily that that feeling is reciprocated. But again, most importantly, the evil queen dies right after feeding Snow White the apple. In this version, the stupid queen leaves in no real hurry. The dwarves are on their way back, but she doesn't know that. And she doesn't try to take Snow White's body with her or send men to deal with it later. In this movie, she knows that Snow White loves a man because that man was brought to the castle wearing the necklace that Snow White wears, and she recognizes it, that it was given to Jonathan by her. Snow White is the only one who can challenge the queen's beauty, and therefore her power. And yet she doesn't take actions to ensure that Snow White remains dead, either by disposing of her body or killing Jonathan. The final moment I'll bring up comes at the dreaded end of the film, when Snow White confronts the stupid queen outside of the castle. The queen just walks out to see her, and she even conjures a dagger and hands it to Snow White and dares her to kill her. She doesn't, obviously, because she's good, but why is this the plan? And she doesn't utilize her magic in any other way. Now, the first example I gave is egregious, but the other two aren't necessarily huge deals. The problem is they're not in isolation. Just about every time the queen is on screen, she's making a dumb decision, and they start to stack up onto one another, further weighed down by Gal Gadot's acting, making her probably an even worse character than Snow White herself. So, we've covered Snow White, the foulest of them all, we've covered the stupid queen, and now we get to the useless dwarves. Yep, these uncanny valley monstrosities. Oh, and if you don't know that term, uncanny valley is the natural feeling of revulsion when seeing something that is almost human but not, typically used in the context of robots. And I know you've seen the dwarves and heard how awful they look, so I won't belabor that point either. The original movie is titled Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, because that's who it's about. In this movie, they're there, but they're pretty unimportant outside of Snow White making her way to their house. I would assume it's because they originally weren't in the movie, and only added as a response to the backlash of having these diversity hires instead. But as I discussed earlier, the dwarfs don't kill the evil queen, they aren't useful in fighting the soldiers with Snow White and the bandits, they're hundreds of years old and have never heard a person whistle? I guess at the end, when the queen unenthusiastically tries to kill Snow White with a dagger, it is a dwarf that shoots it out of her hand with a crossbow. But it's not happy, sleepy, dopey, grumpy, sneezy, bashful, or Doc. It's this one, the actual dwarf actor in the bandit gang, because the dwarves are useless aside from mourning Snow White and Doc accidentally saving Jonathan. We're moving faster towards the end here because I covered a lot in the first few crimes, and some of the world building I have discussed, such as the state of the kingdom under the evil queen's rule. Most of it is left pretty vague, which is fine. The original movie didn't go too much into it either. But there is one key change, and that is what happened to the king. In the original, one of the vagaries is the fate of the king. All we know is that he dies. Perhaps it was from natural causes, perhaps the queen murdered him or had him murdered, but we don't know. In this version, we do know, and surprise, surprise, it makes the king out to be an idiot. Apparently, the queen warned the king of a threat from a neighboring kingdom, so the king went to investigate and walked into a trap. It's teased in the movie that he may still be alive, but no, he's dead. He didn't send scouts or his soldiers to investigate. His wife warned him of a vague threat and he went running headfirst into it. And Snow White never put it together that that supposed threat from a neighboring kingdom never materialized, so maybe her clearly evil stepmom lied to have her father killed. Again, anything and everything they added to or changed about the movie just made it worse. And it shouldn't be difficult to expand on the original Snow White in a positive way. Lastly, let's talk about the visuals. The original movie was, of course, a masterpiece in one regard, which was bringing animation to feature film format. It's not high definition, it's not perfect by any delusional imagination, but if you watch it almost 90 years later, you can see very clearly the heart that went into drawing every scene. And now, all of that is gone. The warmth is just not there. And it's so much more than the dwarves. They were actually some of the least offensive CGI in my opinion. For me, it was everything else. I don't know if a single scene of this movie was shot in a real place. I don't think a single tree was real. And that's coming from someone who doesn't always pick up on bad CGI unless it's really bad. And honestly, that kind of sums up the movie. Where the original Snow White was a somewhat messy passion project, this is a sterilized, lazy cash grab. One that actually didn't grab any cash. It replaced the imperfections of hand-drawn animation with AI-powered CGI dwarves, and the rest of the movie, all of the storytelling, reflects all of that lost authenticity. This movie is terrible, and it absolutely deserved to bomb at the box office like it did. But check out my review of the movie I most recently watched that was actually even worse than Snow White. And I rhymed my review better than the writers rhymed the Amelia Perez musical numbers. I'll see you over there, and have a wonderful day.